All right, I have how many minutes? 6 months.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Hope you are doing good. How's everyone doing? If you can hear me, you can just type something in the chat. I am looking at the chat, so if you do have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. And today we are just going to be discussing communication patterns in SwiftUI, and we're going to take a very simple example of if you have a modal and you want to pass information from the modal to the parent, how can we do that? All right. All right, let me go ahead and do something. Okay. So where is everyone logging in from? If you can go ahead and type in the chat, where are you from? That will be great. And where did you hear about this live stream? That will be also good for me to find out where the users are. So where are you from? And how did you learn about this live stream? All right. I guess I'll start with I'm in Houston, Texas. So yeah, I live in Houston and I work for a coding boot camp, but I also do these live streams. Um, you know, I also do like Udemy videos and on my own website, Azam Sharp, Azam Sharp School. So we have Claire from London, we have Robin and the dog from PT, X. I don't know where that is, but we have Jim from Ontario, Canada. Okay, great. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. We will be typing some code. Email from Udemy as I've purchased some of your courses before. Okay, so that's good, Claire. Yeah, so it's good that you are receiving those emails and you are able to join in. Robin and the dog is from Portugal. Awesome. You know what? I was planning to go to Portugal in, what is it, October? Unfortunately, I had to cancel it, but I'll go some other time. I was really excited to go, but there were some other, things that led to cancellation. So already booked the ticket and everything, but I had to cancel it. But Portugal, heard is beautiful, and hopefully I'll be able to visit visit there. Mano from Austin, Texas. Okay, Austin. So you are my neighbor. I'm in Houston. Uh, Lithuania, email from Udemy. Okay, good. Some people are joining from Udemy, so that's actually really good. Okay. All right, everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't really have many slides. Here's a little bit about me. My name is Mohammad Azam, and I'm an iOS developer as well as a coding bootcamp instructor. So I work for a company called Digital Crafts, where I teach web development and also AI and machine learning. I'm also founder of my own website, which is adamsharp.school, and this is where I publish a lot of my courses. I host a lot of workshops. Actually, one of them is coming up on August 17. Author, speaker. All right. Here is my website, which you may have already seen this. This is my own personal brand, adamsharp.school. Currently, I'm working on a course for Superbase. So this is the one that I'm working on. It's still not done, but as soon as I finish sections, I release it. So this is available on my own website. And you can see other courses over here. Apart from the courses, which you can see there are a lot of courses, I also host workshops. Now, these are hands-on live workshops over Zoom, and this one is coming up. You can see it's on August 17. It's going to come up, so it will be this weekend. And there are many other workshops that are available on Vapor. There's a workshop on Swift data fundamentals. There's a workshop on testing in October, and then on Superbase in October 2 in 26. And one of the new things that I've just added to my website is you can buy the courses, individual courses, but you can also become a member monthly as well as annual. And one thing that I added for the annual plan is free live workshops. So all the workshops that you have seen plus more will be added. You can just attend for free. So that's a pretty good deal. I think these workshops usually cost thousands and thousands of dollars. So you'll get access to this. I'll just post a link in the chat if you are ever interested in visiting and checking out my stuff, then that will be, you will have the link. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what I'm talking about in communication patterns. And if you do have any questions, you can write it in the chat. I'm actually looking at the chat, so I'll be able to answer it. And we're going to take a very simple example, okay? So this is a brand new SwiftUI application. I haven't really written any code to it. And we're going to learn different ways that we can transfer information from one screen to the other screen. All right. The first thing, what I usually do when I'm creating my SwiftUI application is when I'm creating pages or screens, I want to use a different convention, different naming convention for these things. So over here, I should not call it content view. I should probably call it something else. Like if we are displaying, let's say customers, so I should probably call it customer list screen. All right. Now, even though I'm calling it screen, it is a view, but now in my mind or in the design and the architecture, this is not really meant to be reusable. All right. So that's the first thing. So naming does matter. I think if you're coming from a background of React or you're coming from a background of Flutter, they usually use a convention, something like this. They will say customer list page. So they use page because, you know, with Flutter, React especially, they're making website, but Flutter also, they sometimes call it screen or pages, depending on their taste. But that's a good habit to have. That screens are much of a bigger unit. They will have different views in there. All right. Okay. So I have this screen. The first thing I want to do is I want to see that how can I present a modal. Okay. So let's say that I have a modal over here. Customer add screen. So see that I'm using that convention of screen versus views. Customer add screen. I always like to, when I'm writing something, I always want to keep it simple. You can see that I don't have anything over here. It's a customer add screen, and I want to simply present this and nothing more and nothing less. All right. So how can we present this? Well, multiple ways, right? And eventually we want to display the customers over here, right? That's why it's a customer list screen. So let's go ahead and use a navigation stack. Although we don't really need a navigation stack, but I think that's going to allow us to add a toolbar. So I'll create a navigation stack. I will probably create a list with some customers. This is, how I normally do it. See, I'm just filling out some stuff. It doesn't really make that much sense, but I'm just filling out some stuff. Customer. So I have something to display, right? And navigation title, customers. Okay, we got some customers over here. I also want the user to add a new customer, so that's why I'm going to add a toolbar. And now I can say toolbar content placement. It can be anywhere. I guess it can be trailing. And I can add a button, let's say add customer. Okay, we got the button over here on the top right-hand corner, add customer. All right. Now, if I want to show a particular sheet, I will say probably over here is presented equals to true. And now I can use, so this is nothing new. You may have already done this like millions of times. So this is really nothing new. Okay, so this is hopefully going to display us the actual sheet. Let's go ahead and click on Add Customer. Okay, it displays the sheet. All right. So now the question is, if I am displaying the sheet, a different view, which is Customer Add Screen, how can I allow the user to enter text? Okay, so we will add a name, I guess, for the customer. I'm just keeping it simple. Text field, enter name, and we will say name, I guess, over here. We can also wrap this. And this is where the question actually comes. We can just say save. All right. So now if I go ahead and say add customer, now I can also see, let's get add a little bit of padding so that it's a little bit nicer. We're not really going for the style. We're just trying to make it work. That's it. Okay, so I have this text box. I can hopefully enter something in the text box and I can press save. But now here's the big question. How do we pass this information, John Doe, so that it will be displayed in the list? I think that's the communication that we're talking about. And just to make it a little bit more fun, let's go ahead and add over here customers, which can be a string array, and we will say customer name is whatever, Mary, Stephen, and John. And this is the array that we actually want to change eventually. Customer, and we can actually display customer over here. So that we can at least display the customer names. See that? So I'm displaying customer names over here. Okay, so now the question is, how can we pass the information? If I click on this add customer, it shows me this modal, and I can go ahead and enter the name of the customer, like John, and I can say save. But how do I pass this information back so that it will be added right over here? Because eventually what you want is John to be appearing right over here. So what are your thoughts? How can we do that? You can write your thoughts in the chat. I mean, we are going to look at a couple of different ways of doing that. But if this is a scenario, how would you try to solve this problem? Because you need to pass the information from the sheet back to the parent. All right, so this is exactly what this particular session is about. We're going to look at a couple of different ways of how you can accomplish it. All right. I think the first way and the most straightforward way would be to allow the customer add screen to include a closure that can be fired on the customer list screen. I mean, that is one of the things that you can do, right? And if you have any ideas, go ahead and write it out on the chat. I mean, that's the question. That if I click on add customer, I can see the add customer screen, and I can say the name, I can say save, but how do I pass this information from the modal so that it appears over here? So if you're using SwiftUI, I'm sure you have come across this problem, and if you have, how did you solve it? Anyone has any ideas? How did you solve this problem? All right, so let's take a look at the first approach. The first approach would be, maybe we will allow the user to pass in some sort of a closure into the customer add screen. So let's go to the customer add screen over here. And in the customer add screen, we will say on save customer. Yeah, environment objects. We'll come to that. That's a good suggestion from Kenneth. What about environment objects, right? They can also work. So let's first start with the most simplest approach that I can think of is just by using closures. So on our customer add screen, we add a closure. This is a requirement that you need to pass in this closure or else it's going to complain. And once we add a customer, which is in the button click, we can call onSaveCustomer and we can pass in the name. All right. So we created this closure on customer add screen, and then we call the closure when the person clicks on the save function. Okay, but now there's a requirement that you should pass on save customer. So let's go back over here, and you can already see it's complaining right over here. It's complaining that, hey, you got to pass in the, some sort of a function to add that. Now I can go ahead and pass it over here, but I can also create a small function and I can pass that function. So I guess I can say over here, save customer. Or I can just handle it over there also. Both are perfectly fine. And should we call it like name? I wonder if I can just say on save customer and I can say save customer. Save customer. Okay, there we go. I mean, I can handle it over here also, by the way. I mean, I don't have I don't have to create a separate function like a save customer, but I'm just creating it just to show you that you can. So now when we call customer add screen, we pass in this closure, and this closure goes into the customer add screen, and then we eventually, when we call this, then it calls a save customer, which gives us the opportunity to append to the customers. There we go. And since customers is a state, whenever it changes, the SwiftUI view gets re-evaluated and also redrawn if necessary, which I think in this case it will be necessary to redraw it. All right. Okay. Let's go ahead and run this. Let's see if it actually works. Another thing that we want to do is also dismiss, right? So we're not really dismissing this, so we won't be able to see this. And you can easily dismiss these things by using the dismiss environment value, private var dismiss. Dismiss. Check for the validation and all that stuff. I'm just skipping those steps. Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and run this. Add customer. I'm going to go ahead and write the name of the customer, John, save it, and there we go. So it looks like this method is actually working perfectly fine. We are able to add a customer and then we can display it, right? So that's one of the things, one of the methods of communication that you can use. This particular way of writing is perfectly fine until you have an issue where you're not only dealing with on save customer, but on delete customer, on select customer, on update customer, and then you will end up passing like multiple things, and that becomes a little bit messy situation, right? Even you can recover from that situation by exposing all of these options as a enum. So I think I've covered that in one of my articles. Let me actually see if I can find it. I'm not going to add it over here. It might take a little bit of time to add that. Grouping view events. So if you see this article, we're getting into the same issue, right? So we have a reminder cell view, and you have on checked, on delete, on whatever, and you have multiple closures over here. But what if we have more? I mean, 2 is okay, we can deal with it, but what if you have like 4 or 5? Then you will have a problem, because whoever is calling reminder cell view, well, they need to pass in all that stuff, all that closures. So how do we deal with those scenarios? Well, one of those, and we're having the same exact scenario, right? I mean, eventually, when I add on, delete customer, on select customer, on this, on that, one of the ways that you can actually do that is you can create these enums called events. I mean, you can name this anything you want, and then you can just handle it over here. So you can see that I've created a reminder cell events, and instead of having on save, on delete, on update, on select, on this, on that, I just have one on event. Now, better name. I mean, you can just think of a better name over here if you want to. And now it becomes a little bit simpler. What about on the calling side? Well, on the calling side, it is like this. I mean, you are just including one event and you are checking for all of these things. All right. So it is possible that you can write code like this. That is also fine. All right. Let me actually share this article. There we go. So that's another way of doing things. All right. So that's what we covered over here is one way where you can actually pass in a closure and it appends, it basically calls that closure eventually. When it calls the closure, it obviously fires our function and that adds or appends a new customer to the customers list. That is perfectly fine. The other way of building things is by using binding. So let's take a look at this second approach. What I'm going to do is I'm going to comment this out because with binding, we're not really going to be using this. And binding basically means that we will not be using these things. Okay. Binding means that when you call customer add screen, you can pass in a binding, meaning like this, binding of customers, which is of type customer. No, not type customer, sorry, string, right? String. Jakir Hussain, hello, how are you doing? All right, so now I have a dependency on the binding. So this is the second approach, by the way. The first approach was by using closures as we were doing before, but the second approach is by using binding. This means that when you call customer add screen, you must pass in customers as a binding. So now if I go back to my calling site, it has changed a little bit and I can say customer add screen and I can pass in the binding. All right. Now it kind of looks weird to me, to be really honest, that you have to pass in the whole customers to the customer add screen so that the customer add screen can have access to it and the customers, it can just say append the name. So this is through the use of binding. This will work, but it just feels weird. I don't know about you, but it just feels a little bit different, right? Because in order to add a customer, now I have to pass in the whole list of customer to the screen so that it can add binding. That just feels weird. It will work. I mean, if I go and add something and I save it, you can see that it still works and it still, displays all of that stuff. But I think it's a little weird that you have to pass in the binding. So what are your thoughts? Which approach, I mean, we have covered only two approaches yet, but which approach do you use when you have to solve this kind of a problem? And if you have any question, if anyone has any question, you can always go ahead and type it in the chat, and then I can definitely take a look at it. It's saying that Robin is saying that could create a race condition. Race condition. Okay, I haven't really ran into that issue. All right. You can use publish array from the model. Published array from the model. Like, is that by using combine or something? I'm not really trying to use combine, just keeping it simple. Off the customer add screen can misuse the binding list. I don't know what that means. Misuse the binding list. I mean, I guess we can misuse anything we want. So hopefully you're testing it out and not pushing stuff on production without testing it. All right. But yes, the customer ad screen have access to the binding, basically the customers, and they can do whatever they want with the customers. My concern is not like misusing the binding list from the customer ad screen. I think my concern is that it doesn't look right. It just feels weird when you're actually passing in the customers, like this. You can see that the customers as an argument to the customer ad screen. It just looks weird. It just doesn't look, practical. All right. Now, another thing to note over here is that both of these approaches, the one where we use the closure, which was this one, and the one where we use the binding, which is the current one that we're using, they are modifying the customer's array, right? Now, this customer's array is the local state. So this is important to note over here, is that local state, also known as private state. This means that only this particular view, customer list screen, has access to the customers, unless, of course, it passes it to other as a user binding. What if we want to access customers in different screens? Maybe there's a customer list screen, we have an update customer screen, filter customer screen, list of something, like 5 or 6 different screens. So how do you share that information with other views, other screens? Let's say if there are like 5 screens that need to do something with the customers, how can we share these customers with them, right? I mean, I can go ahead and just keep on passing it to other views, other screens, but that become a little bit, hectic or headache. So another option, which usually I choose, is to use environment objects. So for environment objects, I can go ahead and over here, I can create a class. And what should we call the environment object, right? I think that's another issue that we have. If we're creating this environment object, what are we going to create? What are we going to say what that is? Whenever I create environment object, I don't create environment object based on the screen that I've added. All right. Yes, so Robin is saying the same thing. Yeah, so we're going to use that. Now, one of the things to note over here, and that's the really important point, is most people will do something like this. Customer list view model, and we will use observable, right? And since they will say, oh, wait, I added another screen also. It's called add customer screen view, add customer view model, right? Add customer view model. Yes, so we are using the new observable macro. Let's go ahead and import observation so we get access to that. So this is what most people end up doing. They start creating these view models and they say, okay, customer list view model is going to be working with customer list screen, and the add customer view model will be working with add customer ad screen. Now, we don't really need to create 2 different view models in this case. That's why I don't really use view models when I'm using or I'm implementing in SwiftUI applications, because if you're coming from the background of WPF, that's what we used to do over there. We have one screen, we will create a view model to represent the elements of that screen and all the functionality that is going on, the presentation of that screen. But in this case, we don't really need multiple view models, and that's why I don't even call them view models, just for the sake of that. I mean, think about a scenario where you have 50 different screens. Would you be creating 50 different view models? Think about that for a minute. No, right? If those 50 different screens are getting the data about customers, why don't we just make something like customer store? We don't need 50 new view models. Okay, what is customer store and how is it not a view model? Well, customer store is not a view model because we are not really creating it for every single screen. That's the first thing. The second thing is that it's not really a view model because if I want to do any data transformation or any kind of presentation logic, I'm not going to do it in the customer store. I'm going to do it in the view itself. And that is why I always recommend that use the approach that is simplest one, less code. Because in the end, code is a liability. The more code that you write is bad, right? Because you have to maintain it in the future. So what's the job of the customer store? Well, the job of the customer store is to give you access to the customers. Okay? So all of these things, we're going to just put it in a customer. It's not going to be a state variable. It's going to be just customers, just normal like this. This is already a published property. I mean, we are using the observable macro, so all of these properties are already published. So I don't have to decorate it with anything. Okay. Now, how do we? Can we make it, I guess, private? Let's always start with the scope that is not really available to anyone. So I'm just going to make it private set, which basically means that the customers can only be set from inside the customer store, and from outside they are read only, right? Okay. So they can read this, that's fine. Let's start with this and also add another function over here, add customer. I mean, I guess we can say save customer if you want, that's also fine, save customer. We're going to pass in the customer, which I believe is a string, and we can say customers.append customer. Okay. So anything that is related to the customer, whether it is adding a customer, removing customer, updating customer, deleting customer, filtering customers, we can actually put all of that stuff in the customer store. What about the logging and registration? No, that's different. That's authentication. You should probably create a service for that. This is a store. It manages, it stores the information so other views can actually use it. What are those other views? Well, one of the views that actually needs this information is customer list screen because it wants to list the customers. So let's see how we can use the customer store. Since the customer store is a class and it has to be a class in order to be observable, we can inject it in the environment object, and we can inject it customer store. All right. Now, right now I'm injecting it this way. Usually what people do is they create a state variable of customer store and then they inject it. I guess if you're using iOS 18, you can use the previewable, I think. That's a new macro that they release. So you don't even have to create a container view. But anyway, I mean, we're just injecting environment object as a customer store. So this means that now I can access this customer store environment object anywhere in my view. So let's go in my view. Just going to access it. I mean, you can just put environment, customer store, and you can call it customer store. I mean, just be descriptive. There we go. So we got customer store now. right there. All right. Customer store does have a property called customers. So we don't really need this local state anymore. We can just say customer store.customers. Okay, that's good. Let's see if it displays all the customers. You can see that the preview is trying to build on the right-hand side, and it does display all the customers. I mean, obviously, these are all hard-coded customers. By the way, if you have any question, you can publish it. I mean, you can ask on the chat. I'm looking at the chat. You don't really have not that many questions right now, but if you have questions, you can always post it over there. All right. So now we're using customer store, which is coming from the environment. We are using the customers coming from the customer store. We put it in the environment object so that other views can also access it. Now, when I talk about other views can access it, I don't mean that you should just blindly try to access environment in all the views that you want. So this is the very, very important that right now we're working with screens, right? This screen basically means everything that is happening over here. The views can be this part. So this whole thing is a screen. Hopefully you can see the difference. I mean, it's in the end, they're all the same, you know that, right? But the difference is how you're thinking about them. And this is a view. All right. So screen is the whole thing, and the screen can contain views. The view that we have right now is kind of like only one view, which is the list view. Now you can extract it out into a customer list view, and you can work like that. And we'll do that a little bit later. I'll show you how you can do that. But let's move to the customer ad screen. The customer ad screen can also get access to the customer store, so it can change the customers. It can add the customers. And now I can go over here. I can say customer store dot save a customer, and I guess we can just pass in the name. I think this makes it much simpler. Well, again, it really depends on your situation, what you're trying to do, but now you can see that the customer ad screen can directly access the customers from the customer store. All right. And if I run this again, what happened? Okay, yeah, and we need to make sure that we are doing that. So customer ad screen, I forgot to do that part. So if I enter John, yeah, so everything is working. All right. Now, whenever people use environment objects, I think the biggest complaint people have or developers have is that, hold on a second, does that mean that anytime I'm going to be adding something to the customer, all the views that are using the environment store, the customer store, will get re-rendered? And that is not true at all. Okay, and that's a very important thing that you should note, that just because you're using environment object in your screen, it does not mean that every single view, every single screen in your app will be re-rendered. No, it won't be re-rendered. All right, and the reason is that there is a difference between evaluation versus re-rendering. Evaluation basically means that SwiftUI is simply diffing, meaning checking that if those trees, the two trees that are created for two different versions of the same SwiftUI view, are they different? And that is super fast, so we don't even have to worry about that. Re-rendering basically means is that those elements that are changed will be re-rendered. All right. And one of the things you can always do if you're creating those reusable views, then only pass the information to the views that it needs. So if let's give it an example. If I want to, let's see if I can extract this out. So if I say, where is the extracting thing? Embed in SR, I don't know why I'm not seeing that. I don't think it can extract, or maybe I'm not just looking right over here. Embed, oh, refactor. Okay, I'm not sure why it's not showing that. But let's say that if we create another view over here and we call it customer list view. Now this is supposed to be a view that you will probably reuse. And I can go ahead and copy this information over here. All right. So one thing to note about this is we are making sure that this particular view has a dependency on customers. Now, whenever the customers change, that view will get re-rendered. So I can go ahead and go over here and I can say customer list view, and I can only pass in the thing that I want to put the dependency on. All right. Now, in this case, it's kind of like an overkill because we're not really doing much anyways in a customer list view. It's just a list. I mean, we can just use a list over here and that will work fine too. The other thing is that the views that get reevaluated when you change or update the environment are the views that are in the navigation stack. So it's not like every single view will get reevaluated. It will only reevaluate the view that are in the navigation stack. Now, if you have 50, 60 different views in the navigation stack, you got some other problems because what exactly is going on? What are you building that you have like 50 or 60 views in the navigation stack? I mean, how deep is your hierarchy? I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but there's a lot of stuff going on in your app if you're going like that deep, all right? But anyway, I mean, even if those are 50, 60 views, only the views that are using the stuff from the environment, they will get re-rendered, all right? So it's not everything will always get re-rendered. Only the thing that actually changes get re-rendered, all right? And by using this technique of environment object, one thing to note is that if I create another view, another screen, I can just access the customer store from that screen and my data will be, in sync with whatever is in the customer store. I think one of the most difficult parts if you're using this technique is the naming and its division. Like, okay, this is a customer store, but if I'm making an application for an e-commerce application, what should I do? Should I put everything inside customer store? No, you should probably go ahead and learn about the domain of e-commerce application. And one of the ways that you can do that is always use, you can use ChatGPT, all right? So let's say that if I go over here and I say create, not classes, but create bounded contacts. You can say bounded contacts, or you can say models for create outline for models for an e-commerce application. Let's see, just to get an idea, right? You're not just going to copy paste stuff, just to get an idea. Okay, I guess these are product model, category model, order model. Okay, these are models. Okay, that's fine. We want to group them in as an aggregates. So create, let's say, aggregate model. I guess you can say aggregate. Let's see what it does. User aggregate, product aggregate, order aggregate. Okay, it's doing the same thing. Oh, what just happened? Jeez. I'm not sure what exactly happened. Okay, so if I say, what are the bounded contacts of the app? That can sometimes help. Okay. Kind of like the same thing. I mean, it's just showing you the same thing. Bounded context basically means the business responsibilities, right? So we have user management context. I guess if you're an admin, you need that user management. Product catalog management. Okay. So product catalog store or product store, that can be one. Ordered store can be another one, maybe. I don't know, review and rating store or review store, inventory store. Payment processing should not be a store, it's more of a service, right? I mean, so it should be part of your service that you can inject in environment values rather than environment objects. Shipping, again, shipping, is it a store or is it going to be some sort of a service? And then you have marketing and all that. So that's, I think, becomes the hard part when you're using this technique of creating these stores and creating these stores which are holding data. You have to understand where and when to divide these things. For this technique is now used, and people call it MV pattern. I mean, that's fine. I guess I was also calling it the MV pattern, but I was using the term aggregate models a lot also. But people call it MV pattern because this is the model in this case, I guess, and it just directly binds to the view. All right, so there's no like view model in the middle. This technique is also mentioned, and it's kind of like hard for me to, I guess, search now. Stanford SwiftUI course. I think that's the one. If you look over here in 2023, the latest one, it's going to be a little bit hard for me to find that. Okay, it says MVVM, but let's see if they have anything over here. Okay, so this is a Stanford lecture. I think if you scroll over here, it was some of the lecture. One lecture, I think they were calling it. Oh, there we go. There we go. See that? There we go. So they're using the same technique nowadays. I think when they started, when Stanford started, whatever, I mean, 2019 or whatever, 2019, 2021, then they were using a completely different approach and they corrected it. And now they're also using the same approach that I'm showing you. This can work with large application, obviously. It depends on how you're dividing it. And there you can also see this. They're also using the same exact approach. All right. Although they're using the same approach, they keep referring it as a view model, which is kind of weird because these are not really functioning as a view model, but as a store. But anyways, so definitely you can see that they have corrected themselves also. Any questions? The chat has been quite. Any questions in the chat? Or was this useful? Let me also share, try to find out where it is. Yeah, if you have any question, you can type in the chat. Your questions can be, if you want, let's see. I think I've already created a video on this subject. Let me find the video for you. All right. So this is the video you can watch. It's the same thing, communication patterns. And we talked about the same thing over there also. Okay. All right, everyone. Any other question that I can answer? Any clarification that you need for anything else? So hopefully you have enjoyed it. Now the pattern or the design that you choose, it really depends on the type of application you're writing. It's also depends on your team and their comfort level. There's a question: what about source of truth with MVVM. Is there an issue? I think if you're doing like normal MVVM, like the classic MVVM, the source of truth, it does have issues, right? Because let's say that if we wanted to convert this into classical way of doing MVVM, like this app that we are doing, what you will end up do is you will say customer list view model and observable, right? And then, as I mentioned earlier, add customer view. I mean, this is the most common technique that people use. And you will say observable, okay? Well, one of the problems that you face now is that every time you create customer list screen, you may inject the customer list view model as a dependency. I mean, some people do that. The other thing is that this customer list view model will now have this thing like the array. And somehow, whenever add customer view model does something, it needs to go and update to the customers over here. So now you will get lost like, okay, hold on, who is the actual source of truth? Because now source of truth is now everywhere, right? I mean, it's that customer list view model, customer detail view model, customer update view model, add customer view model, and it becomes a little bit hard and challenging to fix or to get access to these things. And if you want to share your customers with 5 or 6 or 10 different views, like a whole bunch of views, then using this technique, it becomes very hard. And one of the things that I always see in Stack Overflow and even online on things is whenever people start using this technique, their questions are always, hey, something on the view is not updating, something on the view is not refreshing. So what they do is they keep on passing that is refreshed, like a Boolean, like flags, like true and false, and then switch then from true and false or false and true. Very bad idea, because now you're fighting the system. All right. So keep your sources of truth. For sources of truth, you can group them. You can group all the, not group the sources of truth, but you can group all of these things. If your application is small, then you can actually group all of them into a single one. Let's say that if I'm building an application, I think the good example, I don't know if I can show it over here. What can be the example? Let's say that if I'm building example of food truck, and this is taken from Apple documentation or Apple. Now, if my app is small, then I don't really need to create multiple stores. I think I can just, I can just use a single store. I can say, well, these are my orders, and whatever your order is, let's say order 1, order 2. I mean, what else in the food truck app? Like maybe recipes. So, okay, these are my recipes. All right. These are my something else, So you can actually use a single source of truth for the entire app. If your app is small or even medium-sized app, you can actually get away with that. You can definitely do that. All right, that's nothing wrong with that. So you can definitely do those things. If your app is getting bigger, then yes, that is when it becomes difficult, because now you need to understand the domain, the bounded context, and you need to understand that how you will divide it. And division is the hard part. You see that when we're doing in the ChatGPT, we always ask it to, okay, divide it into bounded contexts. And this is where you have to go talk to your manager or the domain expert to get a better understanding of these things. All right. There's a lot of questions, so let me see. Would you mind to recommend one of your Udemy courses to begin in the iOS way? For my Udemy courses or my other ones, you can check out these courses over here. This is the brand new course that I published, SwiftUI architecture. Let's see, copy link. So this is the one that talks about the techniques that I'm talking about over here. All right. Other question is, which design pattern do you recommend to use in an ARKit application? ARKit application. It's been a while. It's been a while, but I think in the ARKit application they use coordinators, and all the maybe most of the logic is inside the coordinator. But again, I don't have that much experience with uh, creating very complicated reality kit applications. So I've done small application like a furniture store, and in which I was putting all the logic inside coordinators, or I think it was also inside like the view. But uh, you can check out my reality kit course and get some idea. Using preference key can be an option. Absolutely, you can use preference key. I have passed to protocol parent to child and click some components, data, go to parent child. This is possible. I have passed. I don't think I understand the question. Protocol parent to child, click on some component. I think if you're using a protocol, nothing wrong with the protocol, but you have to see that why you're using the protocol. Does the protocol is only consumed by one concrete implementation, or are there multiple concrete implementations? Because if you have only one thing that is using the protocol, maybe it's not a good idea to use the protocol. All right. But I keep it simple. I don't really use protocol unless I actually have multiple implementations. Then yes, I would, in those cases, I would think about using a protocol. All right. So this is, yeah, this you can actually look at a lot of different applications. I think food truck is one of them. Food truck SwiftUI. Now, I don't know why it's searching over here. Let me see if I can actually find that. Food truck SwiftUI. There we go. Now, people, when they see these applications, they immediately just their reply is, well, okay, this is a sample app. All right. All right. Well, even though it is a sample app, you can learn a lot from the architecture. You can also learn a lot that how these apps are designed. All right. Now, I'm not saying that everything in the app you should follow blindly, but what I'm saying is that you can actually see how Apple is organizing these things. Let's see over here. I'm actually looking for a thing that I cannot. Let's see if I can find it. I think it's called food truck model. Okay. All right. So here it is. It's called food truck model, but it's a food truck store. Okay. Just call it food truck store. You can see how they are managing it over here. See that? Now, since their application is small or even to a medium size, they don't really need multiple sources of truth. They don't need product store, category store, inventory store, this store, that store. So they only have one food truck store. All right, that has food truck, that has orders, that has donuts, a new donut, and it has a lot of other functions like a helper functions to get the summary, to get all these things. So this can also be very, very useful. You can see that all these functions, they're just trying to filter more our orders into a different way: ascending, descending, filtering, ordering, updating. You see that? Updating and all that stuff. So that's what they're doing. So I use a similar technique when I'm creating my own applications, because it's what's the purpose of the main actor? I think the main actor over here, what they're saying is that this particular, well, everything in the class, all the functions, properties will be, when they're going to be set, they will run on the main actor, on the main thread, on the UI thread, in other words, I guess. All right. And if you look at their views, right? Sometimes in the views they also use these properties that are using your food truck model or the food truck store, but then they also perform some other stuff. So if you have any function over here, or any property or a function that is performing data transformation or presentation logic, than you can put in the view itself. See that? So they have views with all this logic. Now the question actually comes is, okay, well, how do I test it? Right? I mean, that's the number one question people say, that, well, how do I test this part? Like, if this is inside the view, how do I test this out? Well, in order to test this out, there are multiple things that you can do, right? You can, if you want, extract this out into a struct, and then you can write a test for it. Most of the time what happens is that the logic that you're putting in the view, which is presentation logic or transformation logic, it's not even that complicated, that if you want to test it, you can write an end-to-end test or a UI test, an actual UI test, to test these things in a more of a passive way, right? So if you're testing, I would basically write a test that if a person places an order, then they can also see the order and things like that. And in a passive way, I can test this, like, oh, the orders have to be, sorted and all that stuff. What about, say, date conversion functions? Do you put them also in the store? No, I would not put date conversion functions in the store. If I want to create an additional date conversion functions, I would probably extend the date time or the date struct and then put those functions over there. So store is only used to, where's my store? I can never find the store over here. Yeah, food truck model. Okay, there it is. I don't know why it just doesn't display over there. It is somewhere, but I can't really find it. Store only stores the data in memory, obviously, which are required for other views, and that's it. All right, and store. This is store. Just not call it model, because I know it's going to get more confusing, right? So I'll just call it store. So the food truck store will have, in this case, because it's a small app, it's maintaining all the different models that you have. So it's going to give you access to all the different models. And it also has a lot of different functions to filter it, to perform different things on it, like, summarize it, get the sales data, donuts, like order binding, order summaries, more like a logical aspects of your code. You can put it in there. All right, update donut, mark order. Yeah, so these are all like logical aspects of it. So mark order as completed, give me incomplete. So this is the main thing. This is the logic, and you should write tests for it. And you can write tests for it because it's just a class. You just write tests for the class. All right. But if you get this data and you're like, I want to modify it a little bit, I want to do a little bit like this, a little bit like that, then those things can be done in the view itself. Like, the view got the orders, but now it needs to like filter it based on something else. Okay, that we can do in the view itself. And I think you can, if you see over here, I mean, there's not much code over here, I guess. Detail map view, donut gallery maybe. Yeah, like donut gallery, you can see filter donuts. So it gets the donut, but then it's using the filter donuts is right there in the view itself. So that is perfectly fine to do. All right. So I use a similar architecture if I'm building the app. One thing I have noticed by using this architecture and then by injecting it in the environment, I don't think they're injecting in the environment. I think they just pass it around. See that? They created this over here, the food truck model in the app, and then they just pass it around. They pass it around to the content view. And from content view, you'll see that it passes it around somewhere else. See that? Right there. They pass it around to the detail column. Let's see what else they do. You see that? There we go. So at this point, when you're looking at this, I mean, my question was like, well, if you're passing around all of these different places, would it make sense to just Put it in an environment, you know? So that's the question that you will have to answer. Like if you can see that they're passing the model everywhere, would it be easier to just put it in the environment so everyone can just access it? You know? That's an interesting question. I don't have the answer to that, but are we allowed to use some extracts of that code in our own project? Yeah, I think, I mean, if this project is given, by Apple, you should be allowed to just, use this code and learn from it and utilize it in your application in your own way. Using this approach, where should go the logic to save fetch from the local storage or a web service? A web service. So that's a good question. The web service one is a good question. And I do have an answer to that too. Let me actually show you. So let's talk about the web service part, not the local storage stuff. Let's see. So I have this really long article, this one. And this article contains a screenshot, this one. See that? Let me actually zoom in. This one. See that? So remember the food truck model or food truck store? This is an actual screenshot from WWDC video. All right. And food truck store is the same thing. It has truck, it has ordered, it has donuts. But one of the things that you can see over here is they're using this one, donut server client, and then it loads the donuts and then simply assigns it. Now, be very careful, because this is what I'm saying, because you just don't want to 100%, you have to think about this, how Apple is doing. And one thing that I would do in this case is not do like this, but probably, probably create some sort of a client over here and allow them to inject it, because you probably will have some protocol and then, so something like this. I don't know if I have actually shown in my example over here. Yeah, so I'm actually showing it right there. So this is how you can have a store model. Again, I'm calling it store model because I don't want to call it store. But let's say this is a, not even customer. I don't even know what that is now. Like we can call it product store. Product store. And you can see that it has a dependency on HTTP client. And then we do the same thing. Add product, load products. Actually, add product, I don't think that's correct, because if you're adding the product, right, you probably should be getting the product back, and then you should be updating your products. All right. But hopefully this will give you a little bit of idea of how to do these things. But yeah, if you're using a web service like a HTTP client, then you can use this approach. You will just add a dependency to the HTTP client and access it. Another way, if you're not using the store architecture, another way is, again, it depends on the app. Another way is to just access the HTTP client directly in your view and then just use it. The benefit of this approach will be, well, it will be less code. It only kind of works like if you are, well, it works in other scenarios, but I think it's more capable, or it's more appropriate for scenarios where the service is kind of like read only, and you're getting the data and you're not really modifying the data. Although you can modify the data. I mean, you can see over here that I can create a resource and I can do all of those different things. I mean, I can just post a new article and I can save it also. So this is more of a React approach. If you are writing React application, this is how they do it. You can definitely do it. The only problem with this approach will be that the articles is a local state, which means if there are some other views that want to get access to the articles, well, then we get back to the same exact communication. Basically, we go back full circle. And how do we do that, right? So we go back to the same one. All of these different techniques can be used to share the state. All right. So this article, I think I already linked, so definitely check it out. Again, it really depends on the app. So you can't really just use one architecture for everything, but I would say definitely try out different architectures and see which one works. I mean, maybe if your app is only consuming information from some API, maybe this is the container presentation pattern, which is very common in React, is all you want. Just keeping it simple. Container presentation. It's a very common pattern. Container presentation pattern. There we go. And this is obviously React, but the same things can be applied in SwiftUI application. You have a container component, which we call screen in SwiftUI. And then you have a presentation component. This is the component that is actually interested in displaying the stuff. So these are the views. So you can use these kind of like techniques. I guess try it out. I mean, because it really depends on the type of app that you're building. All right. So we are way past the time. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And again, if you want to support my work, then check out my website, azamsharp.school. I have a lot of courses over there. I'm currently working on this super base course. You can see it's available right now. You can see the MV pattern, relationships, authentication, storage, real-time, so real-time chat. I've added all of these different things, and I will be adding some other stuff also. You can see a lot of other courses are available. If you're into full stack iOS development, I have a Vapor course also over here, Swift Data course, Reality Kit course, and a lot more. There are some free courses also. All right. So if you are interested, you can grab this course. Let me actually go ahead and give you a link. How do I get the link? Copy. There we go. So this is a free course. This is SwiftUI Fundamentals. There we go. And finally, the workshops. This is close to like 2.5 to 3 hour live Zoom workshops. The first one is coming up in August 17. The workshops are free if you are the yearly annual member of Azam Sharp School. So workshops will be free. And there are a lot of workshops. You can see that. SwiftUI, Vapor, Swift Data Fundamentals, testing, very important workshop on testing. All right. So that's pretty much it. Hope you have enjoyed it. And we will do this again. I'll probably present on some other topics like maybe navigation patterns or sheet architecture, like a modal architecture, which I just published a new video. You can also follow me on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is Azam Sharp. Azam Sharp, that's my Twitter handle. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Hopefully you have enjoyed it and learned something new. Yeah, we'll be back in the future. So again, once again, thank you so much. Thanks for coming, everyone.